kind of really unique panel discussion that we have here. And this is a webinar fashion, so I'm going to be moderating some questions with our guests, and please, as you see fit, please put any questions in the chat, and I will definitely connect those with our panelists today. We have a very unique panel based off of our current production of Twilight, Los Angeles, 1992, that is streaming right now via Syracuse Stage. We have the actress who has portrayed 37 characters and has done a tour de force, Patrese McClain. Thank you so much, Patrese, for being a part of this panel. We have the Right Reverend Dr. DeDe Duncan-Probe from Syracuse, who is not just a bishop here in Syracuse, but someone who was in Los Angeles during the Rodney King trial and subsequent riots and worked with gang members in Los Angeles. And so we have a unique opportunity to meet. I feel like she could be one of the characters in our production.
Oh. Yeah, except Patrese would have had to stutter and look really terrified a lot.
And then we also have here Jimmy Oliver in his new position as the Director of Community Engagement for the Syracuse Police. Welcome, Jimmy. Thank you so much, all of you, for being a part of this very wonderful, cool panel that we have going here tonight. So I'm just going to start off with some general questions, and for you, Bishop DeDe, if you could just kind of let us know a little bit about your experience in Los Angeles. What were you doing there? And a little bit about what you're doing here in Syracuse right now.
Oh, thank you. Well, I moved to Los Angeles, to the area, to go to graduate school. I thought I wanted to be a therapist, so I moved there to go to psychology school. And I had a degree in teaching, and so I looked for a teaching job. At that time, there weren't many, so I ended up teaching at a magnet school. It was very small. And very quickly, I realized that it was a different kind of school because I had 10 students in my room that I co-taught with another teacher. All of the students were in some way or another challenged with learning challenges. But the thing that was the most shocking to me, coming from, suburbs, was the quick need to catch up. Because my kids, the first day, for instance, one of my students came in with 2 police officers escorting him. His head was all bandaged, and he had been the victim of a drive-by. His best friend standing next to him had been shot and killed. And so the safest place, the officers told me, for him to be in Los Angeles was in my classroom, because there was a hit out on him by a rival gang. And right away, I knew that I had a lot to learn, because I had no idea what that meant. And and that was in 1990. And so I taught for 3 years there until the funding was cut for my position. And during those 3 years, it was a time of this turmoil. So a lot of the characters that Patrese portrayed, I either recognized as people who were in the media, or people who were representative of people that I knew. And it was very powerful to see that portrayed. I'm now the Episcopal Bishop of in Central New York. That means from Canada to Pennsylvania, Utica to basically Elmira, up through the Finger Lakes region. I'm the Bishop of the Episcopal churches in this area, and work nationally and internationally with the Anglican Communion.
Thank you. And Jimmy, you have this brand new position, which I think is so important, because we are talking about looking at police reform and looking at how the police can communicate better with the community. Tell us a little bit about your position and what your hopes are for this position.
Thank you so much for having me. The Director of Community Engagement. To put that in layman terms, I am a bridge between the community and the police. To be a mediator, to be someone who listens, takes feedback, and then bring that back to the team to figure out how we can find a win-win solution for our community. And we're going to do a variety of different initiatives, programs to put police and youth, adults in the same space so that we can start creating those positive experiences. And so that's what I'm tasked to do. One of the things I'm tasked to do. So I've been on the job 2 months now. And I've been going out in the community and listening to a variety of different stakeholders, whether it's young people, whether it's adult, whether it's clergy, trying to get an understanding on how we can move forward in a positive direction between our law enforcement and our community, which I think is definitely needed, and excited about this opportunity to take on this task to bring some healing to something that's long overdue.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. And Patrese, you have embarked on this incredible journey of, so many roles. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of role playing, because as an actor, you change your hat or your shirt or your glasses, or you shift your voice, right? And this are some of the ways that you connect with the roles. And when we talk about roles also in the community, where you don on a police uniform, or you don on, a habit, or you are in a position of power or a position of powerlessness, you see these roles. What were some of the, as you approach these roles, what were some of the things that you discovered about these people that you were meeting as you were creating?
Interesting because when you talk about taking out, putting on a hat, or changing your blouse or adding a scarf, like I think the beauty of what the piece shows is that when you take all of that off, the one thing that we all have in common is our humanity. And a lot of the characters, even because it's a docudrama, right? So the pieces are all verbatim, right, from interviews that Anna did over the course of that time. And so even though people are talking about different things, the through line are just basic human needs. I want to be safe. I want to know that my government is not working against me. I want an opportunity, and I want the same opportunity that has been given to my neighbor. I want protection under the law. I want to feed my children, and I want them to be able to go after the American dream. Like, that's the through line. Justice, healing, having our needs met, and making good on the American dream, or the promise of the American dream. I feel like all of those things are values of so many of those other characters. And so, in going, changing hats, and I found as I was performing, as soon as I was able to tap into that need, it carried me from character to character. Even if I changed my voice, or even like the point of view was still the same. The need and the urgency of the need was still the same.
Yeah, and one of the things that you touch upon, Patrese, and we've also talked about, is the fragility of trust. It was something that, we had also talked about. And what were some of the things for you, Bishop DeDe, that you saw that created trust and destroyed trust during that time?
Well, working with the students I was working with, trust was very difficult to earn. When I first started, I actually started midway in a semester because the person who had served in the position before me was so afraid of the students and had had such an emotional reaction that the students were would be real sort of celebratory about they had driven her away, and they had really showed her. And it took me about 6 months to realize that what they were actually saying was how hurt they were that she didn't accept them. And so when I came in, they would tell me they were going to drive me away too. And so they would do all kinds of passive aggressive and actually mostly aggressive aggressive. They would cuss me out, or they would, I learned a lot of cuss words I had never heard before. They would jump over desks, they would throw chairs, they would, anything to intimidate me. They all seemed to be about 6'8", you know, so I'm sitting down, but people who know me know that I'm 5'2", and it was very intimidating, and I really needed the job. And I also kept being surprised by the giftedness in some of them, and in some of their bravado, that you start to see the hurt. And so little by little, that trust begins to build, and then a lot of that goes away, and you start really having real conversations. And in the play, when Latasha is murdered, I remember that so vividly because it impacted my students tremendously. She was like them. They were, you know, kids who would likely have people question their motives, or people who might they would threaten or feel threatened by. And it was in that time, after I had earned the ability to be trusted, that they began to share with me some of their perspectives on things and how they saw themselves as disposable in society. And it was really important to see that. And then also, I think one of the things that really struck me was that the police that worked with us, with these students, because nearly all of them had probation officers, they were in group homes, they were in the system, and so there was a lot going on there. I would see some police officers were great with them. We had a kid on PCP. Often he would use, and then he would come in and he'd get out of control. There were a couple of police officers who would come in, seamlessly take him down, not harm him, take him to where he could get help and recover. And then there were other police officers sometimes who would come in who clearly had not been trained with how to do that. And it would be much more violent feeling, and it would feel disrespectful, and it would feel harsh. And I learned a lot about the way you approach, because there was so much pain and so much woundedness. And it was really, I learned a lot about trust building, and a lot about that you really do have to earn your way to be part of someone's circle.
And Jimmy, you have a lot of experience in Syracuse. You're from Syracuse. You went to high school here. You've worked in the community for a long time. So you've heard the issues that the community has regarding trust and the police. And you know, was that also part of why you wanted to take this job? Because I think, just like, Bishop DeDe says, I mean, there are people who do know how to work, do their job correctly. They have the training, and others that have a different mindset about the power of their position. So what are some of the things that you hear from our community that is part of that need for trust building with the police department?
Just the biggest thing I think is listening to one another, being heard, and taking that information and doing something about it. A lot of times it feels like it goes in one ear and out of the other. Unless you use some type of something that's going to get someone's attention. Maybe I broke a window, maybe I do a protest. That seems to be the only way that folks really feel like they get the attention, when they're sitting down having a normal conversation and talking about the support that they need, or there's been offense against a particular community. No one seems to listen. And the only way is to go march for 40 days, 40 nights, and sit in front of, City Hall, or sit outside the police department. Because when those things happen, it seems like folks start moving, the people who are in charge. And they want to live in a safe community. The community wants to live in a safe community. They want to have a special bond with the police department. But there hasn't been, I don't think, before I got back here, I don't think that there had been, folks being intentional about it, and wanting to hear it, until it blows up, kind of like a reactive response. You got to be able to meet people where they are. You got to be able to, when you go talk to someone, you got to have a conversation with them, not down to them. And you have to come with a sense of respect, and know that they're a human being. They have a voice. They have concerns. They may not live in a affluent neighborhood, but they live in a neighborhood that's a part of this city. And they feel like they should be able to, talk about what's needed. They may not be a part of the problem. They may be wanting to be in a solution. And a lot of times people are not willing to go into those neighborhoods, where things are rowdy. I was trained on those. I worked in a variety of nonprofits. I started my, own baseball programs, reviving baseball in inner city, that, directly targeted folks who need us the most. That's what I worked at the Boys and Girls Club early on in my career. Back in the day, 25 years ago, they send us away for training. They talk about our mission. They talk about our impact. They talk about customer service. They talk about having conversation, talking to people, supporting folks, and getting things done. And that's what I, hope to, bring to this new job, just, to listen, to take those ideas, to take those concerns to the folks who can make decisions, but also put programs and initiatives in place, so that we can make an impact, so we can start, moving the needle. Because again, as I walk through the, different sides of towns and I talk to everyday people, I think it was mentioned early, folks, they want to live in a good community. They want to work. They want to be respected. They want to be able to support their families. Everybody wants that. But everybody's not given that opportunity. And I'm hoping that, in this role, I'm able to partner and coordinate with other nonprofits, which we're doing, other businesses, so that we can cultivate these relationships. It can't just be the burden of the police department, the burden of the community. It has everyone who is attached to this city has to be fully invested in this solution. And we all got to be willing to, as I always say, leave our titles at the door, and know that this is important, for our generation, our youth, our adults, because we can't keep going down this road. And finally, if we sit down and have conversations with each other, we begin to find out that we have a lot more in common than we don't. And if you're willing to put yourselves in the other person's shoes and fully understand what they're saying and how they're saying it, we can start moving in the right direction. And the police chief and city hall, um, everyone here, that's what we want. Our goal is to have better policing, folks who look like us, folks who live here, respect here, and who are invested here. And we're trying to do that by hiring me. I'm just a pillar of police reform. I am a small solution of that, and there's other things to come. And so that's what I would say. Yeah. Thanks.
It's so great to hear Jimmy say almost Steve's words about, because the director of our show said put yourself in the other person's shoes, right, as you were creating this piece. And and when I was talking with Bishop DeDe, she was like, I want to give voice to these young students who don't get a chance to hear their voice. And Patrese, what is it like for you as an artist, right? Working with this particular piece, working with someone like Steve, to, it goes beyond just doing a play, right? When you get to take a walk in these people's shoes and to give voice, and also, as you can hear, create conversation and move that needle that Jimmy is talking about.
First, I want to just say thank you. Thank you, Joann and Syracuse Stage, because, you know, normally in a production, I would be able to have these kind of conversations after, you know, a group would come and see the show. And so I just feel very honored to be privy to the conversations that have been started by the work, because it really is a big part of why we do what we do, especially a piece like Twilight. You know, I think the conversation is the last component, right, of the production. And as a performer, and Steve as a director, I don't think like we know the weight of projects like this, and that it's no coincidence that we choose to do them. You know, when I hear Bishop DeDe as well as Officer Oliver talk, I think about, I have a long history of being in arts education in Chicago. I started a nonprofit when I first graduated from grad school, because I know that art is powerful and I know it changed people's lives. But more importantly, it's an outlet to give people voice and to allow them the opportunity to feel heard. And so I had a little PTSD listening to Bishop DeDe talk, because I've had many of experiences with young people in classrooms where I'm fighting to convince them that I'm here, you know, and it's tough because hurt people. And I think we sometimes forget that, you know, it's so, especially in a time like this where tribalism is so real, you know, where like preservation and protection seems to outweigh the ability to be empathetic to someone else's journey, because you feel like it's going to cost you something, that you're going to lose something in that journey. So I think, you know, the call to do work like this, we hope that these conversations are happening. One of the things that Anna DeVere says about the work, especially when it's done with one person, is that the construct is intended so that people do feel like they are taking a walk in somebody else's shoes, and having the one performer going in and out of all of these parts, you know, it's like so metaphysical. It's right there. You know, I'm literally moving from shoes to shoes to shoes. And there's so much commonality in that. And so I think, I don't even know if I answered your question, Joann, but I will say that this conversation is the function of a play like Twilight. And I think we're grateful. I'm speaking for Steve too, and I'm saying I think we're grateful that the conversation is being had.
Yeah, also, you know, speaking with Bishop DeDe, like I love what you just said, hurt people.
Yes.
And the fact of, you know, we were talking about when you are a part of a community, that the whole community is hurt, not just one person, but the whole community, where parents can't do homework with their kids because they're dealing with their own illiteracy, right? And even if you know, Bishop DeDe, you were like saying, even when the gang members did try to make something, their community would pull them back down. How dare you become successful, right? And so it's like you can't lift one. You have to lift everybody all at once. Otherwise, they you know, they're the tribalism that you're talking about. And but you were able to make like some. I know that it was a bizarre kind of falling in love with each other, because I know that it was so important for you to talk about them and who they were. I don't know if you wanted to.
Well, I would love to, because, you know, some of them really changed my life and my perspective so dramatically. And it really was a learning from each other, because at first it was my seeing their humanity past the throwing desks and cussing and the hurting people and the fear of it. Because, you know, I spent probably the first 3 months doing a lot of talking with, you know, probation officers. And then I sort of got my feet under me and started talking with the students more themselves, where it was like, okay, I'm going to quit sort of referring you out for bad behavior. And we're going to, you know, this sort of like I'm standing here and I'm not going to move, because what you're afraid of is I'm going to abandon you. So, get on with it. And what came out of that was one time I had been there maybe 4 or 5 months. I think it was in the spring, which in California is sort of any time. But we'll just say it was like, May or so. And there was a fight out in the courtyard, and you heard all the noise, and I went out and I'm like looking at, our vice principal was, breaking the guys up, and one of the kids was in my class, and he turned around and looked at me and he said, "Tell them," real like, but with a lot of cuss words. And I, tell them what, I just walked out, and he said, "Tell them you're not white." Only had a lot of words. And I was really struck because I thought, I didn't want to let him down because I wasn't sure what white meant in that sentence, but I knew that for him, it was saving face was an issue here. And so I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "No white person would want me to learn. And you teach me math every day." And I was struck between, I was really caught. I wanted to sort of start crying because he had been really super difficult. Teaching him long division was not fun. It involved lots of cuss words and throwing desks. And it had been really, I dreaded every morning working with him for a long time. And so when he said that, it just struck me because it was like all of a sudden I understood why he had been fighting me. And I also understood that he, the blindness we can have where we can get so committed. So I kind of walked over to him because I didn't know what to do. And I put my arm out next to his arm and I looked at him and I said, "Now I'm white and I want you to learn, and you guys stop fighting," because they were young. And I said, "You stop fighting." And they both looked at me and they said, "Okay." I said, "All right, let's get back to class." And the vice principal looked at me and he kind of smiled and he nodded, because that was like the first real, my cred went way up in the community that day because I had not betrayed trust. I had stood with them, and I'd also sort of claimed my space as a person. And I think that's when they started seeing my humanity. Mm-hmm. But it was really that it was a falling in love with them. And then fast forward like a year and a half or so, I guess it was about a year or more. My roommate came home one day and said that she'd seen my name on a bus, on a Santa Monica blue bus. And I had one student who had been arrested repeatedly for tagging in LA, and that was Mark, that was the student. And if he got arrested one more time for tagging, it would have been his 3 strikes rule. It would have really messed up his whole trajectory. So I went to school the next day. Because putting your name, it's really important to know the culture. At that time, putting your name on a bus was making you famous, because the bus drives all the way around the town and everybody's going to see your name on that bus. Or putting your name on a bridge is flying your, high, and it's about being respect. And it's still the biggest compliment I've ever been paid by anyone. But I went into school the next day and sat down with him and I said, I saw a curious thing. I saw my name on a bus, because I had by this point seen it. And he looked down, he said, "We need to get to work by math." And I said, "I want you to know how much that means to me. And you are never to do that again. Do not put yourself at risk." And, but I sat there for a minute and I said, "But it looked pretty good." And he goes, "It was good, wasn't it?" This was really good. It was really good. Don't ever do it again. Really good though. And, just the stories when we would have breakthroughs like that with kids, but this, and then I'll stop, but he wanted to be an auto mechanic. And at the time, in order to be an auto mechanic, you had to pass a written test that involved long division. And the entire time I was there, we worked on him passing that test so he could be an auto mechanic. And we were never able to get him over that hurdle. And that was really heartbreaking for me, because here's this kid, and his father, as I recall, his father was in prison, and every time he would make inroads, he would get a lot of pressure, but he kept trying to be courageous about it. And that was heartbreaking to me, to see someone who could be something with respect and and was disposable. And I learned a lot from him, and I still, I hope that he has had a good life. I hope that it has turned out better than it was expected to.
You know, it's so incredible, these stories, because also talking with you, Jimmy, you were it's so important, the idea, like what you just said, of telling the truth. And we were talking yesterday, when we're looking at bringing in people into the police department, you want to be a recruit, you got to tell the truth. Do you take drugs? Do you, because if we don't start the foundation on some kind of integrity, if we don't have a relationship based in some kind of honesty with each other, honesty seems such a rare occurrence, right? Especially when we feel like we live in a society that we are being lied to all the time. And whether you're in the community, or even if you're on the force, where you're like dealing with different issues of integrity. So what's that like for you? Because I know you were telling me some interesting stories about like how you work with the community in terms of truth, and in terms of getting to be where they are and lifting them, and letting them see what possibilities there are for them, even if they choose to like work within the police department.
Yeah, I just think that a lot of us, we try to model the way that you should, what you should do. I know, again, I've only been in this role 2 months, and I've had some really nice experiences. And one, I'll talk about the police. I sent a letter to the whole SPD, just introducing myself, where I come from, and what my upbringing was, and told some personal things about me. I told them that I remember who my dear officer was. I remember who my officer friendly was, because again, they were in my community. They shopped at the stores I went to. They was at the gas station. They were at plenty of things. And I we have to show our young people in our community that things are possible, because every day when they walk out of their doors, that may not be the case. And if it's one person that they see doing the right thing, that's another perspective that they didn't have originally. And as I did a ride along with the the police, and the sergeant that I rode with that particular day, we were having conversation. I was telling him where I grew up and what elementary school I went to and how I loved my elementary school. And he was like, "Hey, do you know such and such?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know him. We were best friends in elementary school. I went to his house all the time. His mother fed me. We went sledding together, and his mom was a lunch aide at my elementary school." And he says, "That's my cousin." And I'm like, "What? That's your cousin?" I said, "No, that's not your cousin." He was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I went to Delaware school for a little time, and I moved, my family moved away, moved to the South Side. I lived there my whole life." And it's just, again, having those type of conversations. Had I not rode with, that particular sergeant, I wouldn't have knew we had that connection.
Mm.
And what did he do? He went and asked his cousin, "Hey, do you know this Jimmy Oliver?" And his cousin said, "Yeah, I know Jimmy Oliver. And he's this good guy. I grew up with him." And so he, again, in a certain way, he was seeing if I was telling the truth. And for the mere fact I was. And so as we begin to recruit, officers who are Black and brown and yellow, who we want to be on the police force, the one thing I keep hearing from the leadership is that when we bring you in and we talk to you, we ask questions, the biggest thing is to tell the truth. Um, because at the end of the day, we're going to find out anyway, because we do background investigations, we do a lie detector test. It's better to be upfront about it, then we can deal with it and find a way to get over that hurdle, than someone lying about it and then having to find out, and then it becomes, hey, can we trust this individual writing a report, arresting someone? And so it's getting that information out there. It's talking about the civil service exam. What people, what folks in the community don't know, that leadership is working on programs to help individuals in Black and Brown communities. We're partnering with other organizations to find a bridge to help with that, because they know that's a barrier. And so those are, those steps where we want to start building trust and letting folks know that we're doing that. And if we can do that, every day, 5% better than we did yesterday, we're going to be successful. And I know there's been, I saw something pop up in the chat about dialogues. There has been dialogues happening, and yes, there has been dialogues. I'm sure they've been positive. And I'm sure they, made steps, but I believe now with, the conversations that we've had, we now need to start putting things in place, and start moving in the direction where we can start changing this perception is the community's bad, the police is bad. And that's why we're going to put together the Police Athletic League, where we're going to bring law enforcement, whether it's SPD, whether it's the state police, whether it's the sheriff's department, whether it's probation, whether it's the district attorney's office. We want to bring these folks in to coach our young people, to put our young people in front of these individuals who can not give them a handout, but a hand up, to give them some nuggets, to give them some wisdom, and folks who are going to be consistent. And when you think of police athletic leagues, we think of athletics. It's all about athletics. It is. That's the carrot. But once the young people come into this program, we're going to set them up with mentors. We're going to track them academically. We're going to have guest speakers come in and talk about job opportunities, whether it's we know skilled trades are at its all-time low. We can't find individuals to take those jobs. Those jobs have union. Those jobs pay well. You can raise your family on those things. You can be proud about those jobs. And if that's not what you want to do and you want to go to college, we want to make that an option too. We want to partner with the universities. We want to partner with OCC. We want to partner with community colleges. If they want to be a police officer, we'll have police officers there. If they want to be a fireman, we'll have firemen. So they can put these folks a name with a face and say, hey, I participated in this program. I heard you come give a presentation. You said if I graduated from high school that I'll have this opportunity. Here I've graduated. I'm here. What do I need to do? May not have all the tools. Can you coach me? We have to be coaches. We have to coach our kids up. We have to coach our community up, and our community needs to coach us up. We got to learn too. But again, as I said before, the whole burden can't be on me. It can't be on the chief of police. It can't be on all the officers. Everybody has to take a piece of this. And because that's the only way it's going to work. We're better together. And if we do that, we're going to be successful at this. It may not happen overnight. This didn't happen overnight. And I think a lot of folks want it to be over tomorrow, and we wish we had a magic wand to do that, but it's going to take work, and it's going to take everybody's 10 toes in, 10 fingers in, and really come together. And that's the team that I've been working with since August, trying to make sure we put out something that's going to be sustainable. And all the the major, people, from chief of police, deputies, community members are at the table to make sure we do this right. We're going to do this together, and we're hoping that folks give us a chance, because our kids deserve it. And one of the things, lastly, one of the things that I'm challenged with, and something, that I'm looking forward to. I can't, it's unacceptable for me, being from here, and seeing our young people 12 to 17 commit 264 crimes. That's something that I want to decrease. Our young people who are 12 to 17, should be in job training. They should be playing sports. They should be mentoring a kid. They should be doing, recitals. They should be doing a variety of different things. Our graduation rates just came out. That's another thing that we're going to make a part of our program. We saw the statistics. Henniger is at 61%. 15% of the kids are dropping out. Corcoran's at 69%. 7% of the kids are dropping out. Nottingham is at 69%. 5% are dropping out. And then we have IT Central, who is the highest. I think it's at 98%, and they have somewhere between 2 to 3% dropping out. And our program that we're going to put forward is called Be Great Graduate. The statistics say that if a kid gets a C or better average in math, English, science, and social studies, they'll graduate from high school. But they also got to go to school 96% of the time. But what the third part, which I think is the most important, is that they have to have a caring adult meeting with them an hour a week, checking on how school, checking on their grades, telling them that they're great, rewarding them. And if we can do that together, we can make an impact on, all these things. It's not going to be 100% right away. But if we are invested and we're all in, we can make some changes. And it can happen here. It happened in Virginia where we did this work. And I get excited because our young people need this. They need caring adults, folks who are going to take a chance on them, who are going to cultivate them, who are going to build them up, regardless if they are from Sabine Street or Crowley or Fernwood. They're going to lift them up. And if they cuss me out, when they come back the next day, I'm going to still give, because we got to show our kids that, hey, you make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're going to do that. And we're here to help you not do that. And I was one of those kids. That's why I love Syracuse. I wouldn't be here had it not been for my elementary school, had it not been for my best friend's mother, who was a cook at my elementary school, to take me in. It was a variety of people. It took a village to raise me.
A village, yeah.
And so our kids need it now more than ever. Our community needs it now more than ever. And are we willing to stand up and speak up and coach up our community? And if we're about that, let's get to work. Let's put, there's programs out there right now that we can start today. Let's do it. Let's do it. We know what we need to do. Let's put it in place, and let's get together and let's make it happen for the betterment of Syracuse. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I am have some questions in the Q&A, but so it said, many years when I was in high school, this is from Joanne Wickman, in a conversation of what kind of work path I might consider following. The adult in the conversation said one thing to me that helped me form my own approach to many high school students I taught in my 30-plus career. By the way, I always knew I wanted to be a helping professional. I always think in your own mind about how this individual can teach you something. I think that what you were saying, Bishop DeDe, like that they were teaching you just as much as you were, quote, teaching them, and how much that advice, has impacted her, and she realized respect is critically important, and she really appreciates the panelist discussion. Please, if anyone would like to put any other questions in before we have about 10 more minutes before we wrap up. But that the one of the things that we wanted to do with this kind of panel, I called it rebuilding and healing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things is, when you look at rebuilding, you have to understand that you got to rebuild on top of something that is either crumbled, is broken, right? And so that you know what you're building upon. You're not pretending that what's broken beneath it doesn't exist. And I think that that's a lot of what we come away with is like, oh, let's pretend this doesn't exist and let's move forward. So when all of you think about rebuilding, and Patrese, I think that what you're doing as an artist, I think is so important, doing this kind of work. This is, I think, scary work a little bit. You're putting yourself out there. And I think, one of the things, oh, we lost Jimmy. I hope he comes back.
Sorry.
It's okay. When you think about rebuilding, and this is for all of you, what is something that is like, I know, Jimmy, you just spoke very passionately about what you're interested in rebuilding. So I guess for Patrese and for Bishop DeDe, what are some things that are important for you to rebuild as well, either in the artist scope, in your community, in whatever?
Wow. Well, first I'll say, like, since the racial reckoning, like, what I have been hypersensitive to is all the ways in which I have adopted racist beliefs and practices myself. Because when we think about privilege, we think about white supremacy, when we think about racism, none of us are immune to those ideologies. In a sense, we've all been conditioned. And so I think the first thing, starting with self, is really the healing of forgiving myself for all the ways that I've ingested self-hatred and what that looks like. This idea that I'm not enough, or that in every room I have to fight, or that my contributions are somehow less than my white counterparts. So that is like some deep self-reflection and work that I'm working on right now, and that rebuilding that needs to happen. I think another thing that we have to recognize is, even in the Trump, Make America Great slogan, America was never great. America has not served so many different people in so many different ways. Now, the ideals of America are great. On paper, those ideologies and what they stand for, that is I am American in every sense of the word when I think about those ideals and how much I believe them. But I think the real question is not making America great again, but how can we actually live up to those ideals and make America great the first time? Do you know what I mean? And I think that that's something that I just want to share, because I think if we think about like, oh, let's get back to something, I think we're going to miss this opportunity to actually move forward and create something that has never existed before. Like what Officer Oliver is talking about, yes, he's hearkening back to a time when the police athletic league had dances, that was your social circle, part of your social circle, not just people that came in, if you did something wrong. But we got to start anew. And I don't know the first steps. I think it starts with self first, and being able to acknowledge how we have been silent and complicit in, where we are right now. And then the next step, I don't know what it is, but I do know we got to keep walking. I do know we got to keep trying. And I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime or any of ours. But at some point in time, the possibility of what it could be has to mean more to us than our immediate survival, and that we start to prioritize, not just, with our paychecks, but in action, and get involved in some way,
I agree with everything you just said, Patrese, and what Jimmy shared earlier. I think starts with telling the truth to ourselves and to others. And I think you're absolutely right. It starts with ourselves, doing the work we need to do to learn our history, to learn the truth about the hypocrisy of certain ideals, and to actually to really value other people and to see the humanity of one another. We're too easy to fall into binary categories um, of this or that person and a battle, and instead recognizing, as Jimmy so beautifully said, it's about all of us coming together. And I think the place we have to start is always relationship. Relationship is what it transforms us. Relationship is what heals us. Relationship is what challenges us. And to not be satisfied with easy answers. I talk all the time about what news we watch, and turning off the TV and reading our news and being good consumers of what we're managing. The fear level is so high in people, and we've gotten into literally a fight or flight mode, which I think was actually in the play. And to get out of that place of fearing the other, and to begin to see the humanity of the other, and to see our own humanity, like you said, Patrese, to forgive ourselves, but also to not allow ourselves to be co-opted into seeing someone else as not a human being, to just as them. And I think that is a place that we have to start. And what I learned from my students so many years ago was not to believe what people say, but to believe what they're meaning. And that is so important. I shared a story quickly with Joann about driving. I was driving a van with some of my students, and some guy flipped me off driving past, and my students just went through the roof. They're like, "Stop the car! Go get that guy! He can't flip you off!" And I started laughing. I said, "Y'all do that every day. There's not a day that goes by that one of you is not cussing me. That's just not." And they were very defensive. They're like, "But you're our teacher." I was like, "Oh, so we have a relationship, so you can." Okay. But that relationship is what will save us. And when we see someone else as other, we are seeing ourselves as other. We cannot forget that it is about stepping out of this message of hate and refusing to be part of it, and just saying, "You know what? I'm going to learn a new thing here." And so I think with truth and learning, but most of all, relationship.
Yeah.
And I
And
really
who
appreciate what you're talking about. Yeah.
who benefits by having working class people pinned against working class people? That's just a question that I wish we would all sometimes stop and think about, because it's not either one of us. There's a certain percentage in this country that benefits from making sure that we are at odds, right? Because it allows us to take our eyes off the real prize.
That's right.
And by holding those people accountable,
Right.
we have scraps, and we're all fighting for the same scraps. I don't think that is, I don't think that's by coincidence,
No,
right?
no,
It is
yeah, very organized.
intentional.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
another
yeah.
strategy. I mean, that was very organized, that whole movement. So yeah.
I have a very quick. We have about 3 more minutes, and a little bit. I'm going to combine these three questions, which is going to be interesting because one of them is Patrese. How much research did you do when you were looking at these characters? And we were all talking about history. Bishop was talking about history, and it's like we talk about American history, world history, but we only give 1 month to Black history, right?
28 days.
28 days to Black history. But we were all talking about something which is interesting. We were talking about belonging, and Karen asked the question, how do people of color avoid becoming assimilationist? How do we avoid becoming assimilated? And I think, my thing is, it's like, how do it's we are I think people want to assimilate in order to belong, right? Why would you assimilate to begin with if it isn't to belong? And I think we need to belong because of who we are, like you said, by the character of our actions, not the color of our skin, right? So it's finding that space of how we're going to give each other belonging. And I think going back to the quick question of, So very quickly, Patrese, how much
So
research
hard.
did you do in
It's
these
that's
characters?
that's a hard thing to be brief about. Before, just because it's fresh on my mind, before I go to the research, I'm going to say the first thing that I think about assimilation, which I think is the misstep that happened in the 80s when we first started this idea of assimilation, is erasure. I don't think that assimilation itself is negative, but at what cost, and so we didn't think that through. The fact that, like, in order for me to assimilate means that I had to erase all of any other understanding or ritual or things that were important and adopt yours. I think with assimilation came the idea that white is right, and so it meant that, okay, well, Big Mama, you know what I mean, who used to, or Uncle Andrew, who poured out a little of his liquor when someone passed away, that ritual is no longer acceptable because it wasn't white is right. Do you know what I mean? And so we lost so much of our cultural identity, what little we had. We lost it in that quest to assimilate. And so I don't think assimilation is bad. I think it could be good. I think, but it also has to come with enriching. And right now we have to combat the erasure and pour back into ourselves and see ourselves as whole human beings, because so much of this country has been designed to make us feel less than. And that's the work that I do. Even when I teach younger actors and younger artists, I'm like, first you got to be whole, right? Because so much has been, so many systems have been put in place to make you feel less than that, And so I think by being whole and assimilating is the new assimilation. That's what I'm going to say. I'm coining it today. I decided no, but I think that's how we move, right, in a healthier way towards seeing each other, because assimilation is not bad, right? Homogenation is bad. But assimilation, I don't need you to erase my culture. I just want you to know that my culture has value here too, just as much as yours. As far as research, that's a great way to lean into it, because I attacked all of these characters with that equity, wanting to make sure that I was doing each and every culture justice, each and every cultural point of view justice. When you see me, no matter what character I'm playing, I am fighting for Patrese's humanity inside of those characters. Do you know what I mean? And I identified with each one of their journeys, and oftentimes I identified more with people who didn't look like me. You know what I mean? And so that was a lot of my research. I also lived through 1992. I was younger, so I lived it through the eyes of, like, my parents and my older family. We did a lot of documentary watching, and I was surprised at what my memory did not catch. Because again, my filter is through the eyes of my family. And so I'm experiencing it through adult Blacks in my life. And so I just really having to go back to that time as an adult and really soak in that information from where I'm sitting right now and being able to make my own conclusions, I actually thought was really wonderful. Also, just a lot of dialect work. That was probably it kept me up a whole lot of nights, because again, I want to honor. I don't want to dehumanize anybody in this process.
I think that one of the things I think everyone on this panel has in common is honoring those voices, honoring your community, honoring, one of the stories that, Bishop DeDe said to me, like, when the verdict came of the, of the trial, where on one hand, the policemen were being acquitted. On another hand, the police that worked with you, Bishop DeDe, were rounding up those gang members and taking them to the school so that they would be safe. Mm-hmm. So it's the dichotomy of the human being, right? We're constantly, and the uniform isn't one thing. The uniform does not embody all one thing, and
it is a relationship, as Jimmy was saying. Mm-hmm. They had relationships, and the students trusted them because they knew them. They would not have trusted someone else trying to round them up, but they knew them. They came to the school and they knew us, and even though they came in and they were riotous and chanting, they were banging on the walls and chanting KWP, kill white people, they still, it was incredibly intense. And one kid picked up a chair to hit me with it. And it was very visceral. But then at the same time, once they saw me, it was like, you know, they were like, oh, it's you. You know, it's like, oh, you know, we have a relationship. So it's really and what you're talking about in terms of the sports programs is so important. The building of relationships is and right now, everything you said, Patrese, about, you know, we've got to honor the dignity of every human being. It's really the path forward for me.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you to all our attendees. Thank you. This is also being recorded so you can share it with others. This has been an amazing conversation. I could talk to each one of you and all of you for another hour. This has been amazing, and I commend all of you for the work that you're doing, and for the work that you're doing for all the communities out there. So thank you all very much. And I wish everybody a wonderful evening, and watch Twilight. It's on for until Sunday.
Yes.
And you've met Jimmy Oliver, a new member of our community, and you've met Bishop DeDe Duncan-Probe. So let's form those relationships. Let's be out there and continue the work that we're doing. Thank you guys all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you.